I recently got around to seeing Nakey Jakey's duology on movies that should be games, and like many, I got really hyped for games that don't exist. But it also got me thinking about the weird relationship between movies and the video games based on them in the last few years. And no, I don't mean those shitty cash grab platformers. You know, your ETs, the Cars 2, the video game, or the greatest game in the universe, Alvin and the Chipmunks, released on Nintendo Wii. I'm talking your Blair Witches, your Mad Maxes, the Jedi Fallen Orders, your Alien Isolations, your Alien Colonial Marines, the Alien vs. Predators. There's a lot of Alien games is what I'm trying to say, but there's also a long ass list of these games. Seriously, it's way longer than I expected, and most of these games have mixed to poor reception. And it was also really hard to find games that weren't just cash grabs for the movie release up until around 2015. So we're going to focus more on the games over the last 5 years or so and how they've seemed to be going from pretty bad to actually kind of decent, I'd say. Oh, and major spoilers for these games and movies. Fun fact about this scene from the Blair Witch, right? Heather's screaming is actual genuine fear, since they had, I think it was one of the directors or a producer, I don't remember which, just off of this trailer they had made for them for the scene, and he was wearing an all-white tracksuit and gauze all over his face, like some kind of weird Russian mummy just standing out in the woods, and no one told any of the actors that they were going to do this. So that is her just screaming at this dude standing in the woods in an all-white tracksuit with gauze on him. And I think that's really funny. But seriously, the Blair Witch franchise has had an interesting ride. It started with a breakout hit movie that was the highest grossing indie movie at the time. It got a shitty Rush sequel. Some games were made that weren't well received. A couple books were published. It sat around for a bit. Then it got a soft reboot that was like a weird Frankenstein baby of the first two movies, which ultimately led to the 2019 game Blair Witch, which is probably the highest praised thing since the original movie. So I guess the question is, why did this game work so well compared to everything else in the series? And I think in order to figure that out, we gotta see what made the Blair Witch work aside from that viral marketing they did. So if you've never seen the Blair Witch, the plot is super simple. It's a found footage horror movie about a group of college kids who got lost in the woods while filming a documentary on a folklore that ended up being real. And that's it. No spooky monsters, no jump scares, bad CGI, or anything you'd see with modern horror. It's just three 20-somethings in the woods, alone. And depending on who you ask, it's either one of the scariest movies ever made, or it's boring as hell. But it does deal with themes and elements that, objectively, make the movie scary, like fear of the unknown, paranoia that something is always watching you, mental psyches breaking from stress and fear, and agoraphobia, which I found out is a real fancy term for just being afraid of being in a giant field with some trees around you. Plus, you never actually see the witch, or whatever is harassing them in the woods, which has led to many speculations and theories and interpretations on what actually happens in the movie. So the question is, how well does Blair Witch the game take these same themes and elements and turn them into a game? Well, the answer is kinda. The game has you in the shoes of a guy named Ellis, a former cop and veteran who joins the search for a little boy who went missing in the Black Hills Forest. With help from the goodest boy in the world named Bullet. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy, Bullet? It's set 2 years after the first movie. While the game does have similar themes of agoraphobia, paranoia, and something's just always watching you, and fear of the unknown, the game actually focuses more on Ellis' psyche, PTSD, and never-ending time loop psycho shit, which is dumb. But the psyche PTSD stuff is an interesting take, and it feeds the validity of my own interpretation of the movie in that the witch can't just take adults, as they have stronger mental wills than the kids, who can be tricked with some candy and Fortnite V-Bucks or whatever the fuck kids like these days. I don't know. So she needs to torment and harass her victims until they mentally snap and they're just hers for the taking. This can be seen in the movie by the Twigmen, the rock piles, the noises, the hitting of the tents in the night, and preying on the group's weaknesses such as Heather's hubris and self-indulging mission of wanting to be the next Spielberg, Mike's anger of Heather's self-indulging dream to be the next Spielberg, and Josh's guilty by association. He really didn't do anything. Which can also be seen in this game with the witch slowly degrading Ellis's mental state, using his PTSD and internal guilt to torment him mentally until he breaks, and she's able to turn him into a proxy or something like that, because this game that actually has really interesting source material that can definitely be used to be doing some cool, neat concepts and ideas, had to rip off Slender Man for some reason. But even with its shortcomings, this game is creepy and downright scary at times, especially in that fucking house at the end. Jesus, this claustrophobic ass atmosphere was terrifying. But overall, this game isn't really anything to write home about. It's another horror walking sim with a movie tie-in that doesn't really use those movie's elements to its fullest potential. But it does have the unique element of using bullet to find items and detect enemies. And if you think I didn't carry this good boy for 2 hours until the game wouldn't let me anymore, you're wrong. Overall, this whole thing is a decent yet lackluster game that's nowhere near as good as the movie. But on the other hand, the first Alien is a slow-burning sci-fi horror that dealt with themes of isolationism, survival, fight or flight, panic, the morality of man, claustrophobia, astrophobia, and cats being a fucking nuisance. Now, to me personally, sci-fi horror and things like this, they aren't that scary, especially in a movie. But Alien Isolation takes all those same themes and elements, not only cranks them up to 11, but it subjects me to them directly. And holy shit, did they work this time. And real quick before I actually get into this game, I just want to talk about how the AI for the alien works in this game. Because it's mental. It's actually really cool. The director, who always knows where you, the player, are, and one that actually moves the alien, who has no idea where you are until you make noises or you're a certain distance from it. So I just like to picture the two are always arguing. One's angry, always saying things like, "Look, I'm telling you, they're hiding in the locker in the storage room." And the other guy's just way more radical and free-spirited. It's just very, "Nah, dude, I'm gonna go run around the vents. I'm telling you, we'll find him there, brah." But for real though, I'm playing this game on easy, with a guide, because I'm a little baby bitch when it comes to horror games. And it's still really difficult and really scary. Why can't I fight the xenomorph, and why is it always killing me? And yeah, this game does an outstanding job with those same themes from the critically acclaimed 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien. It also does a super great job at super dark claustrophobic ass places and recreating the environments from the first film, but full of creepy looking robots with beady eyes that stare straight into your soul, and a damn xenomorph. But more importantly, it strips away the badass action people have associated with aliens for the last 30 years. Because you're not the badass pseudo space mom with a machine gun taped to a flamethrower like Ripley in the critically acclaimed 1986 sci-fi action classic Aliens. The only weapons you really have to fight the alien in this are dark corners, your wits, and dumb luck. Much like Ripley in the critically acclaimed 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien. Except this time you have a sweet wrench thing, and I'm pretty sure you get a wiffle ball at some point. I don't know, I'm only on the 5th level, so we're gonna move on to the next part because this game actually does a really good job with being scary.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Because I want to talk about how dog shit of a movie World War Z is. Seriously, if you didn't know, it's actually based on a book by this dude. His name's Max Brooks. and it's written as like a collection of accounts and testimonies from survivors of the apocalypse. It's more of an after-the-fact kind of deal and absolutely nothing like the movie. Hell, Max himself has even said that the only thing his book and this Brad Pitt shitstorm have in common is the name.
The book? Really don't have a lot in common. They got a great title. And then I went to see it. And it didn't suck. And I didn't hate it. And I specifically thought I would hate it because it was so different from the book. But what shocked me was it was exactly because it was so different from the book that I didn't hate it, because it was just somebody else's movie. It had nothing to do with me. So I was completely emotionally divorced from what I was seeing on the screen.
Brad Pitt, more like Brad Bitch, am I right, fellas? So instead of an interesting look at humanity's fight for survival against the undead all across the globe, we get Brad Pitt taking exotic vacations with underdeveloped characters, plot convenience out the wazoo, bad CGI, and an overall formulaic and boring zombie movie. And really what I'm trying to say is, this is a game that rips off the mechanics of Left 4 Dead, uses the name of a Brad Bitch movie that came out 6 years before it to sell copies, and that movie is based on a book that has absolutely nothing in common with. So if anything, this game is a closer adaptation of the book, which is really interesting, and what I'm trying to get at is this game is actually pretty fun, especially with friends, since it takes the core idea of the book and explores the world this garbage movie made. And I think people didn't give it a chance because it was named after that bitch Brad's movie. And it's sad because from a technology aspect, this game is impressive as fuck. You see all that? That's not a cutscene. These dudes are rendered in the game real time, and they are coming to eat my butt. Not only do all those butt munchers render in, but this game looks pretty good doing it. It seems like this aren't just relegated to this one moment in this first level of the first campaign either. They happen almost every level, and it's a constant, and it's always awesome to see. And if you don't believe me, or you're waiting for something to hold you over until Back 4 Blood comes out, go play this for yourself. It's on Game Pass, and I'm pretty sure it's cheap everywhere else. I don't know, honestly. The only reason why I've played it is because it's on Game Pass. But Mad Max is a different story, since it's pretty easy to make your own Mad Max tale. Just have Max doing his thing, you know, helping the little guy. Make resources like water hard to find. Give people some jerry-rigged cars that look like they shouldn't be running but somehow do. Set it in the nuclear wasteland once known as that made-up place Australia. And finally, make everyone except Max kinda crazy and look like they belong at a BDSM nightclub. After that, you just kind of fill in the rest as you go. I mean, just look at Fury Road. This movie starts with like 20 questions, and it doesn't answer a single one. All we know is Max and this lady are the good guys, this dude's the bad guy, and he's got a guy that plays a guitar chained to a semi-truck. And that's about it. You just kind of find shit out as the movie goes, and what you do find out, it's not a whole lot. And the game isn't much different story-wise. It might just be because I'm an idiot, but I had no idea what was going on at the start of this game either. All I know is some dude stole my car and my jacket, and then he just kind of left me in the desert with a dog. There's no setup, it all just kind of happens. And after that, you're just thrown into the world and you start beating dudes up and taking their gas with help from Quasimodo. Don't get me wrong, the game's fun. The combat's pretty reminiscent of the Arkham games, even though it has a control scheme that, just like the language people from that made-up place Australia speak, is ass backwards. Seriously? Why is right trigger sprint and left trigger jump? And who made left bumper aim? It makes no sense. Who said, hey, you know that basic control scheme that's worked pretty well and has been the standard for most games since Halo CE? Let's just throw that out the window and let Bob from Accounting's cat push buttons for this thing, alright guys? Trust me, it'll work. But even with that price of admission, the game tells its own unique story, even if I don't really know it. And you gotta give it props for that. It's doing its own thing.
This is where the fun begins.
Yeah, so Jedi Fallen Order gets its own segment. Not only because it's a fun-ass game, but because it was impossible to find another game that tells a story within the movie story that isn't a Star Wars game. But more importantly, because I want to mention how before the prequel trilogy came out, and all people could do was speculate on what the Clone Wars actually was, it was a very widely accepted idea that the Clone Wars was just some dude cloned an army of himself and waged war against the Jedi. Just because. And I just can't imagine anything other than Gary from Fallout 3 laying siege to Coruscant. And I really want that now. Can someone make that, please? But on a serious note, a lot of what happens in this game wouldn't happen if it weren't for Revenge of the Sith. And yeah, there's some things taken from Rogue One, Rebels, and the Clone Wars, but that's mostly gameplay things like the K2 robots or the Night Sisters. Speaking of the Night Sisters, I just want to say, fuck the Night Sister. This game is only about 17 hours long, and I dedicated about 30 of those 17 hours to fighting this Ben 10 Omnitrix beast-looking bitch. Why was she so difficult when the second sister and the guy with no shirt were just so easy? I mean, she's the first real boss of the game. It shouldn't be this hard. But back to my point, this game could arguably exist if we only ever got the Holy Trinity of nerdom. But without that golden scene of Palpatine stating the words that made many a man cry,
execute Order 66.
A lot of what happens in this game probably wouldn't make much sense. Especially when you consider what people thought the Clone Wars was before the Clone Wars, but also that not a single event in this game is dependent on any of the actual movies or their characters aside from Vader towards the end. And it still works since they just take some key story elements from the movies, such as the Empire being its big bad self and a kind of pseudo mentor-mentee stance with Sarah and Cal to Ben and Luke, and it builds its own independent story that isn't relying on some major event in the film, like the Death Star blowing up, or Mace Windu getting yeeted out of a window, or the other Death Star blowing up. In all reality, this game can and does fit within the one passing line where old Ben explains what happened to the Jedi.
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights.
Because at its core, you are one of those Jedi that Ben talks about. And that's all the story needs to build its tale. And we don't get that enough in games like these, where it's just, build the story without having to do with the movie. So I don't really know where I'm going with this or what the purpose of this video was, but I do know I want to talk about movies that get video game deals outside of the cash grabs, because it's really cool seeing these movies with interesting ideas and themes and stuff that maybe weren't popular enough to get shitty sequels ruined by studios. So hopefully they start to instead get decent games made by fans for fans to let them explore these worlds the movies made. So let's demand more action and chaos like Mad Max and World War Z, or spooky shit your pants scary stuff like Alien. And I personally would never turn down a Star Wars game. Just please, for the love of God, stop making dog shit like Battlefront 2. It's like the whole story mode was just an afterthought 4 years later, and that thing is still a buggy mess. Whoever designed that mess should be publicly shamed, and I hope you feel bad for what you made there. But hey, if you like the video, there's some fancy buttons you can push to help support it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me ramble. Hit me up on Twitter or go see one of my other videos. That'd be cool too. Okay, bye-bye. Love you.